Hey, this is Ming from agentsofspeech.com. Today we'll talk about why your child is nonverbal. So there are a few reasons usually. The first one is that it's a language delay. If your child is 1.5 years or older, then yeah, they should be using single words by now. And we can see language delay going up to 2 years or two and a half to three that can still be a nonverbal child. So it might be just a severe language delay and that there's a subgroup of children who we call late talkers. It's not much of a real term, like a very official term. We use it for children who are not on the spectrum, don't have anything else going on, and they're just late. They're just basically late talkers. There's a few books on this. There's one called the Einstein syndrome, like late talkers, late speakers, whatever it was. And it's just basically talking about children who have normal intelligence, who have no other morbidity problems, like no other type of diseases going on, and they're just delayed. Okay. And we see these children starting to pick up the pace at like 4. And most of the time, I think maybe in my experience, I'm not talking about real statistics here. I'm talking about like 50% of the cases that come through our door are like that. And this kind of delay cases are easy to treat. And I would not venture into saying that, oh, it might not be easy for everyone. I was just saying that it's relatively easier to manage, first of all. And the second thing is that these language delay cases, they are usually quite stubborn, they're smart, and so they get their own way. Okay. That's for a different video. But I'm saying all the reasons for your child being nonverbal, they're gonna have very similar things. All right. So in the comments, probably, and I'll probably get some emails saying, "Oh, is my child like this or that or whatever?" I hope it's language delay only. I hope so too, but we'll never know until we do more. We test more, we do more stuff. And what's important is that you don't get stuck in the phase of hoping and praying at something or not something in terms of diagnosis. The most important thing is that you jump into action and start teaching your child, because the moment that you do, you put it as a priority, you will see results quicker. Okay. Anyways, so the second thing is autism is getting more and more prevalent now. I don't know the reason for that. If I did, even if I did, right, what can I do? What can you do, right? If there isn't really, it's very unclear right now. Hopefully, we'll get to the bottom of why it's increasing. Some people will say that, oh, it's because we have a better way of defining it and better way to identify it and stuff. I think so as well. But at the same time, autism shouldn't be something that you're thinking too much about if your child is around 1.5 years old to 2. I think that it's easier to identify and think about it by the time, like between 2.5 to 3. And to be very honest with you, the therapy and the treatment or intervention, however you like to call it, doesn't differ from a person or a child who is just purely language delayed. When we do very similar things. Our goals do tweak a little bit, but a lot of the techniques and the philosophies behind the actions are pretty similar. And you can watch a lot of videos, or you can just go to agentsofspeech.com/course to see the courses that we give parents for free. Those will teach you to go from like 0 to words pretty quickly. Anyways, the third reason is speech disorders. So there will be a bunch of there's a bunch of disorders that render a child or a person unable to speak. So one of the hit words nowadays is that apraxia of speech, but the percentage of people who have it is very low. So even if your child is nonverbal, please don't jump into the conclusion that, oh, maybe it's apraxia of speech, because it probably isn't. It's so low of a chance. And you would say, oh, it's a small chance, but it might be. Your brain shouldn't go there, because you can only really check for a child if he or she has apraxia is around like 4. The reason why I'm chuckling is because even if you did know, the stuff that we would do in the beginning are pretty much similar too. We will also need to establish a means for them to communicate with you, which always comes in the form of gestures. And we will also need to establish verbal imitation in order to know what sounds they have or have not, in order to know if it's apraxia of other types of speech disorders. All right. There are other types of speech disorders like dysarthria, which is a weakness in the oral muscles, which is actually more prevalent than apraxia of speech. And there's a problem with differential diagnosis right now with a lot of therapists out there. I think there needs to be a more public education about this. And this is also why a lot of therapists are not comfortable with giving a diagnosis of speech disorders. They would just call it articulation or just phonological, or most cases they just call articulation. Don't drill in it into it too much, especially if the professionals aren't ready to make a diagnosis because they're not a specialist, of which I'm not. And a lot of times what I see is like parents will share in the community is, oh, my child is suspected apraxia of speech. If there were so many suspected apraxia of speech, I think we would be very busy. So I don't really think that's the case. A lot of times we take it with a huge grain of salt. And the last reason for a child being nonverbal is that it's a genetic disorder or a rare disease. All right. And these things come in very different forms. And we'll never know when a child with these will actually talk. I had a student who had a genetic disorder. I forgot which one it was because it was so rare. He was stuck at action imitation for half a year. And then we were trying to get him to use sounds for a whole year before he started talking. And once he started imitating, boom, he started talking right away. And his language was actually a lot better. And we realized that the genetic disorder actually caused a speech disorder, the dysarthria that I was talking about. There was weak oral muscles. He had hypersensitivity in the mouth. And so we had to help him with those and also build up the coordination of his mouth muscles. Would you call that apraxia? I don't know. Probably not. I didn't. And it doesn't help anyways. So there are marked differences, but we're not going to go into this right now. But there are also loads of rare diseases that happen and it will also trigger some speech disorders too. All right. And by the way, even autism is correlated with speech disorders. Okay. And usually what I see is that these genetic disorders either create some sort of motoric difficulty in the child. So if you see a child unable to like do gross motor things that are like easy for other children, then you think about a speech, which just in the mouth, there's like hundreds of small muscles coordinating to create the speech sounds. So if they have coordination, range, mobility, strength issues with the gross motor stuff, just think about how easy it would become an issue when they start talking. All right. So these genetic and rare diseases will create problems motorically. And then they will also create problems with the cognitive side and how cognition and language is interrelated. As we grow older, that when we talk ourselves into things, we use language to think. But also we require a certain amount of cognition to understand language. So I'm not saying that a child who has a rare disease or a genetic disorder, they will have accompanying like cognitive disorder, meaning that their intellectual ability might be lower. We don't know because it's always masked by like their language, the hearing, their motor skills. We don't know. Sometimes we just don't know. What I'm getting at is that if their cognitive abilities are lower, then it will also delay the language acquisition. And these two things, the motoric and the cognitive, will actually in turn constrain how fast a child can develop in terms of speech of language. Okay, so enough of me talking about these really long words, right? So knowing about whether how your child is speech delayed and nonverbal, will it help you with the treatment or not? Most, like 80% of the time, it's not going to, especially if your child is below 3. If your child is like above 4, then yeah, it's going to change a lot. We're going to use a lot more AAC, like using an iPad for communication devices. We use PACS, right? We use different ways of doing the oral motor stuff and making sure they have like good play skills and whatnot. But below the age of 3, we're always going to try and push speech imitation so that we know where we stand at, number 1. Number 2 is we're going to push for play skills to see how well they're cognitive developed, to see if they can learn a certain play sequence, if they like it or not. And number 3 is that we're going to push for a way for them to communicate with us functionally, be it using gestures, or if they are up to it, we can use PACS, okay? So knowing why doesn't really help that much, especially in the young ages. And it's absolutely a time waster for you, especially even for professionals like myself. And I'm not a specialist by any means, but I'm telling you, even specialists out there, they will reassess the whole situation later on. Meaning that we'll start intervention first, and then we'll do a rolling dynamic assessment about the general motoric, speech, whatever, the whole assessment. We just keep on dynamically assessing it, okay? Because what we want to do is we want to provide treatment, not to provide a label, okay? So forget about the label first. The label is going to be helpful later on for when your therapist goes on a holiday or like they have to do something else in life and they have to pass on this client to other people, and that they have to communicate their case to an IEP or whatever. And they say, oh, this child is like apraxia of speech or like dysarthria. They have an articulation disorder, they have a phonological. They have phonemic, all these words don't mean anything to a parent like yourself, but to another professional, it's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. I see now. Oh, it's apraxia. Their breakdown level is here. They can say these consonants. They cannot do these. The number of syllables is like that. They have a syllabic separation. Whenever there's like up to 4 syllables, they just break down. These are the patterns in their speech, so on and so forth. So it only makes sense to professionals, the labels, when you have to pass it on and have a clean record of the case history so that you can work with someone else to do things, right? But it doesn't matter to you, especially if your child is below 3, because what are you to do? There's so much for you to work on. I mean, I've talked to parents who have read through all the textbooks and stuff and learned a bunch. And at the end of the day, they're like, oh, the stuff that you tell me, I do it, it's working. Why did I go through all that? And the answer is because probably after you read the whole textbook, you have to put a face to a name. You need to know, oh, this child is like this. But you only have one client, which is your child. You don't need to learn so much stuff. And you won't see all the variations. So leave it to the professionals and do the work, okay? If you want to learn about the work, you can go to www.agentsofspeech.com/course. We have a bunch of courses there that are free of charge for you to watch, which will teach your child to go from 0 and all the way to full sentences and above, okay? And of course, you don't need to learn from us. I'm just saying that if you want to, please go there. And if not, I'll see you in the next video soon. Bye-bye.